Hello, I'm Eli Arnold, University Librarian and Director of the Philip Weltner Library here at Oglethorpe. I welcome and thank you for joining us tonight for the fifth event in our year-long series of programming to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment, granting suffrage to women. The library is coordinated with faculty and staff across campus to bring a full series of lectures, concerts, and more to help students in the entire OU community reflect on this landmark legislation. After tonight, our next suffrage event will be Wednesday, February 24th at 6 p.m. when Dr. Jessica Tompkins will offer a lecture titled Living with Ancient Ideas, How the Ancient World Created Female Suppression. Tonight, Oglethorpe Professor of French, Dr. Jay Lutz, will introduce our speaker. Dr. Lutz?
Thank you, Mr. Arnold. Our speaker this evening is Professor Jessica Handler, author of the novel The Magnetic Girl, winner of the 2020 Southern Book Prize and a nominee for the Townsend Prize for Fiction. Also, one of the 2019 books all Georgians should read, an Indie Next pick, Wall Street Journal Spring 2019 pick, Bitter Southerner Summer 2019 pick, and a Southern Independent Booksellers Association Okra pick. And I have it right here, and I recommend it to you.
Thank you.
And I wanted to mention that Professor Handler joined my French New Wave film class in the fall to talk about how vaudeville and pseudo-scientific experimentation connected to early silent film and ultimately to the French New Wave, which was a very useful and energizing addition to our class. Professor Handler's memoir, Invisible Sisters, was also named one of the books all Georgians should read, and her craft guide, Braving the Fire, a guide to writing about grief and loss, was praised by Vanity Fair magazine. Her writing has appeared on NPR, in Tin House, Drunken Boat, The Bitter Southerner, Electric Literature, Brevity, Creative Nonfiction, Newsweek, The Washington Post, Atlanta Magazine, and elsewhere. She teaches creative writing and coordinates the minor in writing here at Oglethorpe and lectures internationally on writing. Tonight, Professor Handler will be offering us a talk titled Their True Stories, Using Research to Inform Narrative. And there will be a time for questions after the talk, so please join me now in welcoming Professor Jessica Handler.
Dr. Lutz, thank you. Mr. Arnold, thank you. I know it's probably not de rigueur to laugh at your own bio, but whenever I hear my bio, I just go, I don't know who that is. So let's see, I want to put this on speaker view so that I can see myself speaking. Or maybe I'll just put it on gallery view so I can see all of you. When we go to questions at the end, we'll do hands up, or if you've got questions in the chat, my guess is that Eli can keep an eye on those for me. But thank you for coming. I appreciate this. And I'm going to talk tonight about the almost 16,000 pages of letters, speeches, newspaper articles, and other suffragist documents on the Library of Congress's website called By the People. And we'll navigate that. We'll take a little walking tour of that in a few minutes. Notice too that I'm using the term suffragist rather than suffragette, which is feminized and diminutive. So I choose to use suffragist. By the People was launched by the Library of Congress in 2018. And the project By the People overall seeks to make the library's collections word searchable and easy to read, useful to scholars and lay historians. I am a novelist, a creative nonfiction author, a research nerd, and some of you in this room can attest to that, and I am also a lay historian. So my interest lies in how do we use primary sources and secondary sources to inform what we write, fiction, nonfiction, poetry, whatever our genre is. Because if you're writing about real people, you want to be able to, if not hear their real voices, read their real words, get their real vernacular, feel their real experience. So that's what this website does. I found out about By the People last year, probably through an e-newsletter because I subscribe to all of them. And I like ideas, and this is where I get them. The By the People initiative invites volunteers to log onto the platform and transcribe the digitized papers of, in this case, women involved in the American suffrage movement. And as I said, we'll kind of take a little walk through the website in a few minutes. The Library of Congress itself, and I know that Eli can weigh in on this, is a fantastic resource in person and online. I've used its resources in writing What's That Guy Over My Shoulder, The Magnetic Girl. I've used it in writing Invisible Sisters. It is the largest library in the world. It's the home of the US Copyright Office, and it is the home of nearly 200 million items, books, print materials in almost 500 languages, manuscripts, the largest rare book collection in North America, legal documents, films, maps, sheet music, sound recordings. You want it, they got it. And I think Eli is nodding vehemently. So anyone can participate in the By the People transcription effort, and I haven't yet. And we were going to do this a year ago, literally a year ago. And at that time, before we became little digital people in boxes, the transcriptions were not yet done. As of the last time I looked at it, which was 2 days ago, it's mostly done. So my original plan was to show you how to do it, but now I'm going to show you the value of having it done. So, it's the same basic idea. Library experts at the LOC hope that by transcribing the documents in the By the People initiative, volunteers will help make suffrage materials more accessible. There's a librarian there named Elizabeth Novara, and she's a librarian and a women's history specialist at the LOC, and she told Smithsonian Magazine, doing these transcriptions helps people feel a connection with the suffragists. Feel a connection. Feel a connection. This is what story does. It helps us feel a connection to another person, another time, another place. There is no one in this digital room who walked the earth in 1920. If you did, y'all looking real good. So we get to feel a connection with them. Research is context. Research is story. I have 2, 3 former students in here, 1 current student, so who know that I really lean on that research is story. Sarah, you're a former student of mine, right? Sarah Rogers? Yeah, I thought so. It's just, if it was more than a week ago, I have no idea what's happening anymore. This is why I turn to resources like By the People, because writing is an insular activity, but research is often where the writer and the reader feel that connection. A project like By the People uses primary sources, uses original documents and objects from the period or the individual in question. Secondary sources are sources that retell or interpret the events after the fact. So it's this originality, the fact that you are looking at and in better times actually holding in your hands, and you better be wearing the little white gloves, the letter that somebody wrote, that they folded, that they put in an envelope, that they went looking for their stationery or their pen, including the one that just fell off my desk. And they sat at their desk and they thought about what to say. And 100 years later, it's in your hand and you're reading it. So before we go to the website, I want to read you a selection from a book that came out in 2019 called The Woman's Hour, The Great Fight to Win the Vote. It's a nonfiction account of the fight for the 19th Amendment by a woman named Elaine Weiss. And Weiss did do extensive research at the Library of Congress, although since the book came out in 2019, she wrote it before the We the People initiative launched. But here's how research informs narrative. Carrie Chapman Cat had spent a long night, day, and early evening on trains clattering over 1,000 miles of track from New York City to Nashville. In the hours she wasn't reading field reports and legal documents, rimless eyeglasses perched on her nose, she read newspapers and indulged in the guilty pleasure of a detective novel. You have the sense of a long train trip. You know the kinds of documents she's reading and the eyeglasses that she wears. And you get a sense of how she feels. She feels guilty pleasure in reading detective novels and taking a little break from her important work. So Carrie Chapman Cat was a real person. She directed the National American Women's Suffrage Association and founded the League of Women Voters in 1920. It's still around. She also apparently liked detective novels. That's where this comes from. I personally have not written about the suffragists, although I remember being in maybe the 6th grade and reading a novel called Never Jam Today, as in jam tomorrow, jam yesterday, but never jam today, which is from anybody? Alice in Wonderland. And it was basically a YA novel about the suffragists, and I just lit up. And they used research in that as well. But everything I write is in some way about women and voice and power. So let's take a look at the webpage. By the way, the word suffrage originates in the Latin word suffragium, which means the right to vote. SUFFRAGIUM. So let's go to share screen. Okay, let's not do that. Hello. Can you see this now? Tell me yes. Okay. So you see Library by the People, and you can see that they have a Walt Whitman project going on. We're going to look at the Suffrage Right to Vote project. Look, they have a spiritualism project. If you've read The Magnetic Girl, you know I cannot wait to dive into that. They have a section about the Blackwell family, and Casey Sepp wrote a really interesting piece in the last issue of 2 issues ago of the New Yorker about the Blackwell sisters, who were 2 of the first women admitted to American medical schools. There's also a link to the papers of Mary Church Terrell, who was a Black woman who suffragists were not all white women. And of course, the issue of abolition and the issue of who gets to be prominent in the story that's being told was a fight that started long before the Civil War. But Mary Church Terrell was a Black suffragist, and here's a link to her papers. She picketed the Woodrow Wilson White House. So let's spend some time with her. Let's go to View Projects. Let's see if I can make it work. All right. So we can see a variety of items here. Let me see what we can do. Oh, look at this. Can y'all see this?
Yes.
Okay, good, because I never know if screen sharing is working. We can see a variety of items in the Library of Congress collection for Terrell. Appointment books, letters, diaries and journals, something called Democracy in Action. Let's look at her diaries and journals, shall we? Let's. Okay, so one of the things that happened here with this project are they had 192 volunteers who signed on, and at the end we're going to talk about how you can do this if you want to. Suffragists, Walt Whitman, mesmerists, whatever you like. They had 192 people. It looks like everything that was in the Terrell collection, 1,135 documents, have been completed in terms of transcription. So let's take a look at something and see what happened. Let's find her papers and diaries. Let's see if this works. Okay, so here's a diary. Here's another diary. Look at that. Oh, it's in French. Jay, time for you. I can dope my way through it, but you're fluent and I'm barely conversant. The first thing I want to say, though, is, yes, this is in French, but how many of us can read archaic Palmer method handwriting, right? There's a real issue going on now in that people coming up in elementary school and high school are no longer being taught cursive, what's called cursive writing. Now, those of you who have been in my classroom and have seen my handwriting are probably going, thank heavens, because my handwriting is, I believe the correct word is a tragedy. But here we've got, let's see if I can make this bigger. I can. So, you know, if you were to handle this page, could you read this writing, French or English? Could you read this handwriting? Not easily. Most of us don't really know how to read sort of, but handwriting is a difficult thing to read. It's very personal. But it also tells you that's her handwriting. That's how she shaped her letters. So this says, this evening I began a journal, a diary in French. Jay, what else does it say? I've got you one sentence.
I haven't kept one in English, but I'll try
Trying
one
in
in
French?
French. I'm expecting to write something each evening about what happened during the day, or what I think would or just to see the progress that I hope I'm making in French.
Okay. And that's, yeah, and this was, Jay, I didn't plan this. I didn't even know she spoke French, and there you go. And she's got somebody, she's very happy, comfortable with Madame Schmidt. So this tells me that this is a woman who is practicing her French, and somebody transcribed this. So let's get out of this and go to something else. So I already know Mary Terrell a little bit better. Let's see if we got something in English, shall we? Oh, for crying out loud, Mary. I don't know why these are all in French. But what we can see is, I didn't check this, but what we can see is, for some reason, she kept her diary in French. Let's go to something that's not a diary. She may have kept a diary in French to keep it private. Let's see. Here's a calendar. There were 29 people doing this. 104 pages have been done. Did you keep your calendar in English? You did. So here we have her diary, and you can see the wonderful physicality of what the paper looked like in 1927, the kind of font they used. Her handwriting, Phyllis came home from New York and told me that RN, look at this. She brought me a beautiful green gold lorgnette from Brother. She had her diamond ring reset. So these are women who, you know, she's working in the suffrage movement. She also is keeping a diary. I think this is fascinating. So let's get out of Madame Terrell and let's go to something else. Let's find another one. Let's go to Suffrage, Women Fight for the Vote. So here's Carrie Chapman Cat, who we just read about. View projects. Okay. So with view projects, right, we've got Susan B. Anthony papers, we've got the Mary Terrell papers, Carrie Chapman Cat, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, the Blackwells. There's a number of families and organizations that have given their material to the LOC that the Library of Congress has acquired. There were 9,841 volunteers. They have completed 109,025 documents. There's still 31,000 that need looking at. Look, there's 1,200 that haven't been started. Let's do one, shall we? It has a question mark. I wonder why. Not started. Some of the Blackwells haven't been done. Somebody tell me which one we should look at. Pick one for me. Anybody? Am I piloting this by myself? Well, let's see. Let's go with in progress. What's in progress? General correspondence, organizing for women's suffrage. I don't know who Catherine Breshkovsky was. Shall we find out? Okay, so what would happen is you would, if you were a volunteer, someone has started this transcription. Can you finish it? Well, we don't have to do this now, and you have to log in and get registered. So don't worry, you're not going to have to jump in the pool and do it. But tell me, somebody, let's make this a little larger. Oh my goodness, it's not in English again. That's surprising to me. We should probably find one that's in English, shouldn't we? But I guess if her name is, okay. Oh, this is fascinating. Look at this. Okay, here's one that was started. So this tells me if this, oh, this is in English. Okay, good, yay. So here is a letter. And if you were a volunteer on this project, you would be assigned, or you would sign yourself in and say, oh, I'll do these letters, or oh, I'll do this file. And then you would sit at home or sit in your office and log in, and you would have this digitized, this digitized handwritten letter. And then with it seems to be, how do we navigate over here? A typewritten letter that says, oh, you know, I'm not real super good at this. Anybody who's seen me try to do digital stuff, whoa, flip horizontally. My students are laughing at me, I know this.
Put
To
the
the
cursor,
editor, what now?
put the cursor on the typed part and then, and then click down and then drag it over.
Thank you, Eli.
Of course.
I can do a headstand though. I'm just like, there are some things I can do in life. To the editor of the Christian Register. So what do you see about this? Talk to me about the physicality of this object. Anybody want to unmic themselves or unmute themselves and tell me, what does this archival thing tell you about story? Anybody? Objects. It's an object, right? Here's what I see. I see it's typewritten. Who in this room has a typewriter? I have an old one in my office in Hearst. Danny, you have a typewriter. Electric or acoustic?
Electric.
Oh my gosh, do you use it?
Yeah, it's currently stored away because I'm not done packing and not unpacking, I should say. But yeah.
Yeah, so it's a very particular feel when you hit the keys and you get a very particular look. You can see that they've marked it out. You can see that there's some kerning issues. I wish to appeal through your columns to the free and generous American people. So somebody logged in and went to the handwritten letter. And let's look at the transcription. I'm trying to move this so I can read it. My poor children send you, dear lady, their sincere thanks. They bless the hand of mercy. So somebody just sat down and it's like code, right? It's like figuring out what was on these people's minds. And then here we are talking about somebody trying to raise money for exile or for somebody in exile. So my question now is, how does this feature into this collection, right? How does this feature into the National American Women's Suffrage Association, which is the collection from which it comes? This is not a thing I can answer. What you have when you're dealing with this kind of research, this kind of ephemera, is little bits and pieces. And it's not till it all gets put together that you get a larger picture of how these two particular women mattered, except my guess is that the NAWS was somehow trying to get this woman suffrage in America, freedom in America. What's not started? Is there anything? Can we see? No, nothing is not started in here. So let's go back to something else. So this is what you've got here with this huge collection. I'm just paging back through the top of it. I'm curious about miscellany. Can I look at miscellany? What's not started? 0 is not started, but here's some stuff. Now the Blackwell family, so the Library of Congress has given you a paragraph of information, basic historical information about the collection that is being transcribed. So Henry Brown Blackwell corresponded with many of the leaders in the women's rights and abolition movements, as well as many of his Blackwell family members, including his sisters in the medical profession, that aforementioned Casey Sepp article. Elizabeth and Emily. He supported the women's suffrage movement by founding this association with his wife, Lucy Stone, who was very important in the suffrage movement. Financial records, autobiographical sketches, and autobiographical material. So that's cool. What's this? Well, this may not need transcribing because it appears to be a newspaper article, except the club women. Somebody started it. So, you know, one of the reasons to have something transcribed, even though it's printed newspaper as opposed to, you know, somebody's diary in French, is so that it can be annotated, so that it can be word searched, so that it can be indexed, right? It looks like a very bad poem. I got a couple of poets in this room. You may agree with me that it's certainly a romantic poem. I would honestly be more interested in seeing the law of married women in Massachusetts. Oh, it's a book review, a brilliant and breezy little book. What about the club woman? Ah, okay. Look at this. Yeah. So it's just fun stuff. I don't know. So how does the project work? How does this work? If you were to get on the Library of Congress by the People website, anywhere on this, you can go to, should be the Help Center. Look at that. Welcome to By the People. Here's a guide to help you get started. Hang on. They have instructions on how to transcribe, tag, review, how to create an account, choose what to transcribe, transcribe what you can. So if you can't read all of it because of handwriting, because of language, because of however, leave a blank. Click save as you go, submit for review. A librarian will weigh in and help you with it, or someone else might jump in and say, oh, I can do that next paragraph. I know how. So it's a community effort. And what happens here is we see here the quotidian. I'm going to get out of screen share. Okay. We see in this the quotidian, the daily lives, the moments of people who were active on the front lines of social change 100 years ago. We've got somebody keeping a diary. We've got somebody doing a book review. We've got somebody else trying to raise some funds to bring somebody to America. It's fascinating to me as bits and pieces of the larger movement. 100 years ago, we were talking about feel the connection. 100 years ago. Think about this though. Just in the past few months, since November, or 77 days before that, if you follow the New York Times, just in the past few months, how Americans vote, if their votes are counted, who gets to vote, has come under scrutiny, has come under threat again. What happened 100 years ago addressed certain issues, the rights of women, the rights of people of color, that we are defending now again. So history, what is it? It's never passed. That's Faulkner, I think. So as a writer, I ask of you, because so many people in this digital room are writers, I know that at least 4 of you are, what of your papers, already digitized, because look, we're in a digital world now and we email and we live in a digital world. What of your papers will stand the test of time? And if you say to yourself, well, emails, you just, they're already digital. They can already be word searched and stuff like that. But future transcription volunteers might get tripped up by neologisms of our era. For example, folks as FOLX, or the honorific mix MX, right? Things that we are aware of now that are perhaps new to us, that are things that we're putting forward. But if somebody in 100 years tries to transcribe your diary, your process journal that some of you have done or are doing for me, sometimes by hand, they're going to come across, I can't read your handwriting, or I don't know what this word means, or why did you care about that particular thing, right? So future transcription volunteers might not have to figure out cursive handwriting, but they're going to have cultural references and neologisms to figure out. So my point here is that the individuals in the suffrage movement 100 years ago and more, the famous and the not so famous, were real people with real issues, including, I'm going to try and keep my diary in French and make my French better. Reading their speeches, reading their letters in their own handwriting with their crossouts and their X's and their postmarks and their coffee stains. That's the connection. That's the connection. You look at a letter and you look at the stamp on it and you go, oh my God, the stamp was a penny? It's a little quotidian things like that that really matter. This brings history home, and this helps me and it helps you tell a story about making change and about how change creates history and change can create freedom. So if you want to get involved in By the People, we can go back to the link, or I can answer questions, or I can re-navigate some more of it if you want to play around with it. Anybody want to unmic themselves and unmute themselves and talk to me, or go into the chat? I should do what my former agent used to tell me to do, which is always pick a ringer before a talk and say, when it goes to questions, if it's quiet, you're the ringer, so ask the first one. So I didn't do that.
Jessica, I'll say, I just think it's fascinating to go to those original documents And I can remember my mother working on translating her grandmother's journal, where, it was like a record of who came to visit, what happened that day. But the challenges she had just reading the handwriting.
Mm-hmm. Translating from what language?
Oh, it was just English. But her challenge was being able to read it. And I mean, I've seen those journals, and the immediacy of it is actually captured pretty well in this format with the Library of Congress.
Yeah, the immediacy of it. That's a really, really good word. And yes, and I see that we've got a hand raised, so we'll go right there in just a second. Yeah, the immediacy of it, that's a really, really good way to say it, because you think, oh, it's 100 years ago, how can it be immediate? But when you get your hands on it or look at it digitally, all of a sudden it is immediate. That's fantastic. Thank you. Hi, next.
Was that me?
Yeah, it's you. Hi.
Hello. Sorry, I'm
multitasking. I miss you in Hearst.
I miss everybody at the entire university by now, but thank you. It's so fun to see what you're doing. And of course, I have some possibly controversial questions.
Bring it on.
I feel like that's become my trademark. Don't we have too much junk these days? I mean, how much of what we put out there these days actually has any substance?
Well, it's a really good question. Go ahead.
Sorry, like just to piggyback on that, how much of nostalgia and like this romanticizing of the past goes into poring over somebody else's random old diary? Not this particular one.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
I know that I love that. I know that I'm like so interested. And I have definitely been guilty of looking over all of my old family papers, and I love all the museums and I love all of that. But I just do wonder sometimes, what do we share at this point that we have so much information about us, right?
Well, also, what did they share? I mean, looking at some of this stuff, as I was scrolling through it, and I've looked at some of it, but I haven't looked at all, 160,000 pages or whatever. But as I'm looking at it, I'm going, this didn't necessarily, I don't really need to see this letter or this diary or something like that. But you don't know it as a historian or a researcher or an author. If the Library of Congress acquires or is given such and such a collection, then what they get is everything that's in that collection. And then the next step is to get people to transcribe, codify, organize what's in the collection. And then, and I know Eli can speak to this, and then what happens is, as a historian, as a researcher, as a writer, you spend a lot of time saying, this is interesting, this isn't. This matters, this isn't.
No, I absolutely agree. And there's definite historical importance to it, especially because there's like less of that information out there and we're losing it by the day, right?
Right.
So I absolutely understand that.
And nostalgia, nostalgia, there's this sort of rhyme or crust of sweetness to nostalgia, but I don't think that that is necessarily true. I get very nostalgic about stuff like fonts, and that's just me because I'm a history nerd. Or I get nostalgic about stuff, not nostalgic because I wasn't present for it, but a 1-cent stamp. So it's for the reader or the historian to say, this matters to the story I'm trying to tell or it doesn't. So that comes back to you as the inquisitor or the interrogator saying, I have all this junk in front of me from the Library of Congress. How much of it is relevant to the story I'm trying to tell? Maybe none of it. Maybe all of it. I hope not, because then that story is unwieldy. Maybe there's a needle in a haystack, to use a cliche.
Sure.
Or maybe somewhere in there, and I'd be really curious to ask Casey Sepp, who I do not know, how much of the Blackwell papers she used off this site to write her piece for the New Yorker. And that's not a plagiarism question, like you took it away, more like, how deep into that world did you dig to come up with what you wanted to say? So yeah, you're right. There's a ton of junk out there. There's a ton of junk out there. But one man's junk is another man's treasure.
Absolutely. Maybe more pertinently about our own lives, right? And like the stuff that we put out there. I remember when I was in grad school, my professor said, this was a tragic story. and I don't know why she said that, but she was like, make sure your last paper, you know, if you die tomorrow, make sure this paper that you're writing for me, that it might be the last thing you ever write.
Oh my God,
It's I know.
me?
I love her. She's still
Okay.
one of my favorite people.
That's,
But she did say that.
yeah.
She was like, make sure that, you know, make sure that when you're putting things down, right, on paper,
Mhm.
make sure it's valuable, make sure it actually represents you. And I don't think that, I mean, this was 10 years ago or whatnot, but I don't think we do that anymore. We do not have that kind of, it's not like we have a scarcity of paper and now I have like 10 pages before me and I will fill them out and it's going to take me hours.
Mhm.
It's like, you know, we're shooting out these messages and emails and
Right. We're less thoughtful about,
right.
or let me say something though, as a person who reads history and writes history, we believe ourselves to be less thoughtful. But I mean, if you spend enough time with archives, you'll find a lot of stuff. And I know Eli would probably agree with me on this. I hope you can. You'll find a lot of stuff in archives. You're like, why did they save this? Or, you know, why the love letter to, you know, your prom date in 1937? You know, it's sort of like, yeah, you know, so there's still junk out there. There's definite junk out there. And then another thing to come into play, of course, is if there's language used, I'm not going to use any pejorative language here, but we all know that there is terminology and phrasing and beliefs that are inappropriate, that we know to be inappropriate now, so, and hurtful. But if we go through documentation from 1927, from 1950, we are going to come across language and beliefs and expressions that we find hurtful. So is that junk? Or is that historical record? And I can't answer that. I leave that up to you as the historian, as the writer. So yeah, but again, one man's junk is another man's treasure, and one man's trash is another man's treasure. I'm not saying that in terms of pejorative language. You know, I'm just saying that. I mean, when I was writing Invisible Sisters, I went back to my diaries, and from being 9, okay, until like the year I was writing it. So there was definite junk in there about being 9. I mean, do we really care that we had banana splits at Janet Berger's birthday party? No. You know what I cared? I couldn't spell banana. See, so they were I called them bunna splits. So so that tells me who that kid was, and that tells me what birthday parties were like in that year in that neighborhood.
That is so interesting.
That's how that works, right? So who's got another question? Now that I can spell banana. Tell me another question. I need another one. Eli, I should have made you my ringer. I mean, you and I did an exercise with some students about the Oglethorpe archives.
Yeah.
It was fun as all get out.
Right. Well, and both you and Layla were kind of pointing to the importance of, well, I guess the pause you have to, have when working with archives, because, what is there for you to research is what ended up there.
Right.
There's a lot of stuff that didn't end up in the archives. The archives is a place where, if, just random person X papers, probably aren't going to end up there. Granted, any American can donate their papers to the Library of Congress if they want, and they'll keep them in the Library of Congress. But, most people don't do that. It's famous people, or it's privileged people, or it's the role of the archivist and librarian that calls those collections.
Right.
There's extreme power in that, of if something is even the Oglethorpe archives, when something is donated to the Oglethorpe archives, it's my job to put that in the archives. Or if I was an evil archivist, to throw it away. If I didn't agree with, the person that was donating it, I could not include that in the archives. That's a lot of power that like the librarian, the historian, and the archivist have, which I think points to the importance of, people donating their papers. Yeah. You may not think you're such an important person, and I encourage Oglethorpe, associated people to do this all the time. Like, give me your papers from 30 years ago when you were at Oglethorpe. Give me your syllabi. Give me your yearbooks. Everyone's story is important, and the more stories we have in the archives, the the more inclusive it is. And that's super important, especially in the world we live today. If
Yes.
you're trying to do research on, poor African Americans in 1913 Atlanta, that would be really hard because there's not a lot of primary sources on that. Because those weren't the folks that were keeping the material or were able to, or
their stuff got thrown away before anybody in the family could say, hey, wait a minute.
And who would have taken it, in 1913, so it's like, you have to kind of think about that, which is a lot of archives nowadays, especially, there's a big push to, to make sure it's representative of those groups that haven't historically been in the record.
And this goes to the phrase that I can't find a source for this, it's apocryphal, that history is written by the winners.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that phrase exists, history is written by the winners, is because your regular people across the spectrum didn't know to or think to or feel that they should keep their stuff and have it go into the record. So history is written by the winners. If we look at the suffragist movement, yes, women were given the right to vote. Or in the case of the suffragist movement at that time, white women were given the right to vote. And then we get to the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which is again under attack. So were they winners? Who was the winner? And if you look at this whole collection and we see papers from all kinds of people, leaders of the field, Susan B. Anthony, Lucy Stone, Carrie Chapman Cat, but also people you might not have heard of, like Mary Terrell, right? Or Elizabeth Blackwell. So the more voices are collected and honored and transcribed, even if the person transcribing it, typing it into the little box is going, I don't really care that you're keeping a diary in French or that you burned the roast. You still get a picture of that person's life, not
Exactly.
only as a leader. The day Mary Terrell marched on the Wilson White House, led a picket line at the Wilson White House. That's a winning moment. But who was the woman who got us there?
And that's the importance of this transcription, just like what you said, because most folks can't travel to Washington and go to the Library of Congress and know who Mary Terrell is and find the archival boxes with her papers and find which folder and read that. But when it's transcribed, if someone searches African American suffragist, it's going to come up in library databases and searches, and that's going to expose her and her life, to everybody.
And then you can also bypass what Layla called junk, and I'm not saying that you were wrong to say that, but once it's transcribed, it can then be word searched, and you, the researcher, can target what you're looking for and get past what might be junk and say, what is in this collection about X march, or the day she was arrested, or her wedding, or her funeral. And that way you can just go for what you need. But somebody had to wade through the crap, pardon my French, to get you there, right? And wading through the crap is all kinds of fun. Jay.
Well, I think I would bring up another aspect of this, since I am like all of those of you speaking, I'm somebody who studies the late 19th French century, and late 19th century, and I think what I regret, I think it's great that a couple of decades ago, so much material is available to me digitally that just wasn't possible, like this project, which is great in so many ways. On the other hand, I would make a case for, again, some kind of importance given to having the actual document in your hands.
Oh, yeah.
And that is becoming more, in my experience as a researcher, that's becoming rarer and rarer. I'll just give you one quick anecdote of when I was working at the National Library in Paris. They misplaced the microfilm for some documents that I was researching. And it was like it gave me a birthday present. They said, well, you know what we're going to have to do? Bring out the actual documents, and gloves and all of that.
Okay, all the nerds, let's just have a nerd moment. Everybody nerds, come on, let's party, Jay, nerds. Yeah, and you're absolutely right. There is nothing cooler than saying, I don't know, it's in a box down the hall, right? You're absolutely right. I think that we can do it both ways. I mean, if a person cannot travel to the National Library of France or to the, what do you call it, the Library of Congress, they can do this, or they can do both once we get back in the world, which we will, Dr. Fauci says by summer. So go, Dr. Fauci. And I can tell you some of the greatest moments of my writing career working on The Magnetic Girl was when I found out that the library in Madison, Georgia, which is about an hour from my house, it's not far, has her original autobiography. And I got in the car and I went over there and I put on the little white gloves and I went into a room and I turned the brittle little pages. And they were the same brittle little pages that she had turned.
Exactly.
Connection. Or the joy, what you don't get with the transcription, if you're doing what I was just telling Layla about was, if you're doing that word search and you say, I only want information about this event, Jay, what you're pointing out is that you miss the serendipity, right? And the serendipity of you're looking for something, but you find something else and it takes you in a whole nother direction. That is a birthday present. And I contend that we need both. Yes, Floor. I don't know Floor. Hi.
Hi there. I'm a freshman student at Oglethorpe, so it's probably why none of you know me yet. But
Well, welcome.
Thank you. I found it very fascinating that we mentioned kind of needing physical documents. I mean, my family is Mexican. I come from Mexican descent, so we do a lot of like talking across the country, and yet what we never really do is kind of send letters anymore or documents to kind of hold that.
Yeah.
It makes me wonder just how we will have a history of life in America and life in Mexico, how we view each other without any physical document. It's all on the phone.
I know.
Facebook. It's very different and a little sad because there's no physical record you can share.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's for historians and archivists, this is a real issue. I see Eli is nodding vehemently. I mean, yes, we're recording this event and a person could look at it, assuming that they can download something from the cloud in 100 years. I don't know, I won't be here in 100 years, but you're absolutely right. I can tell you that there is a movement afoot to write more letters, write more postcards, partly because of the threat to the US Post Office under the Trump administration. There was a real push to write postcards, write letters, keep the post office moving. So there is an uptick in that, but I think you, Flor, can take it upon yourself to write letters, write postcards, keep a journal, either digitally or by hand, in English or in Spanish, however you are most comfortable or is most appropriate to the people with whom you're communicating. But I think it's on us in this digital world as we get sucked into the digital vortex to keep that old stuff going to some extent, right? Other thoughts? Flor, does that help? You're absolutely right. You were making a very, very valid point.
Yeah, it really helped. And interestingly enough, I'm not sure if many of you know, but I know a lot of people my age right now are really into stationery. And I've seen so many people wanting to write more letters and just meet people through pen pal letters rather than just online anymore. And I think the pandemic has really made that a bigger necessity.
I think you're right. And it's also Newton's third law of motion, because for every action is an equal and opposite reaction. So if we go too far in the direction of digital, there are going to be people in generation, whatever you are, is it Z or A minus or what is it now? I don't know. But there's going to be people who are 19, 20 years old who are like, nah, I want stationery. I want a nice pen. I'm a pen freak, by the way. I want a nice pen. I want to do this. And so, knock yourself out, man. I think that's fantastic. And yes, the pandemic has created this need for a different kind of connection. And I think the physicality of pen and paper and stationery and cards and pictures is responding to that. So good, then you'll have an archive. There was another question. I think I saw a hand up, a digital hand. Nay? Well, you have a link if you want to go back into it. I can put it, well, Eli, you've got it in the chat, right?
Yes.
So yeah, so if you want to go back and fool around with this website on your own, the Suffragist material looks like it's pretty much done, which is actually kind of cool. At first, when I was writing this talk, I was like, oh no, it's mostly done. But then I was thinking, oh, cool. That means, look at all these people who've signed on to do this. But if you want to do Walt Whitman, I mean, the great gray poet, right? If you want to look at Whitman, if you want to look at spiritualism.
Well, then we may have, it was funny as we were doing this in the pandemic world, we're always looking for projects for our library student assistants. And I've started having them transcribe items from our archives.
Oh, cool.
Of letters and things. And so this makes me think maybe I can use some platform kind of like this to open up to the Oglethorpe community to do some transcription of things from our own archives, which would be kind of cool.
That would be really, really cool. And that would mean that people could log in from wherever they are. I do not know. I know nothing about how to set up a website, so I don't know how they did it. But you must know people at the Library of Congress who can probably clue you into it.
Right. Well, it's
go ahead.
Because so many people think that, how easy it is to digitize, and it's not, that's not an easy thing to do,
Right.
Even stuff that we have now, it's like there's so much stuff out there, it makes it not searchable. And especially things, even like you were saying, the newspaper print, like, you either have to scan that in a special file format individually and put it up, or someone, literally transcribes it by typing information in. And that's kind of a misconception of modern archives. It's like, oh, well, just digitize everything you have so it's searchable. And
that's not a scan. It's not like running it through my old Epson right over there on the corner. It's a whole nother level of technology. And the other thing about transcription is that you make a commitment to the document that you are going to be faithful to what is in the text, even if the grammar is bad, or even if it's a word you don't understand, even if it's a word that you don't like. You make a commitment to saying, this is the historical record, I have to convey it. So that's an interesting challenge to a person as a writer. It can also be tedious as all get out, because you're typing. And you might be typing and going, oh my God, this is so boring. I don't really care about your grandmother's cake recipe. But it's her grandmother's cake recipe. So that's it. So I welcome you to email me. I'm jhandler@Oglethorpe if you have questions or comments. Flora, I look forward to seeing you in a writing class at some point in the future. I do not have any freshman cohort at this semester, but I'm, come see me next year for creative writing. If there's anything else, anybody have questions, let me know, and enjoy your writing. And I look forward to seeing you all.
Great. Thank you again.
In the world.
Thank you again, Professor Handler, for presenting to us tonight. This is absolutely amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, and as a reminder, again, our next suffrage event will be on Wednesday, February 24th at 6 p.m. When Dr. Jessica Tompkins will offer a lecture, Living with Ancient Ideas, How the Ancient World Created Female Suppression, for our sixth event as part of our centennial or semester, year-long, I guess now. So thank you all again for attending. I appreciate it, and everyone have a great night.